Her heart raced as she neared the pile of discarded bread. She picked up a loaf, examining it closely. The crust was stained with a patch of green mold, but when she tore it open, the inside seemed soft, still edible. It wasn't perfect, but to Helen, it was a gift. Hunger had erased her hesitation. She looked around to make sure no one was watching, then quickly broke off a clean piece and brought it to her mouth. The taste didn't matter. It filled the emptiness, even if just a little. She sat quietly in the corner, away from the eyes of those who might drive her off again. Her feet ached, her back was sore, but for a brief moment, her stomach was no longer crying out in pain. She closed her eyes, resting her head on her knees. Her breath slowed. The exhaustion from days of walking, searching, and hoping was finally catching up with her. Just as her eyes began to close, she heard something. Muffled, distant, but urgent. A voice cried out in pain. Helen sat up quickly. It was coming from a narrow alley near the back of the bakery. She stood, unsure of what she had heard, until the voice called again, weak and strained. She followed the sound, turning a corner and stepping cautiously down the alley. There, slumped against the wall, was a woman. Her hands gripped her swollen belly, her face pale and glistening with sweat. She was heavily pregnant and clearly in distress. Helen's heart pounded. The woman was trying to breathe steadily, but pain twisted her features. "Help, please," the woman whispered, barely able to speak. Without thinking, Helen rushed to her side and knelt down. "Ma, are you okay?" she asked, her voice shaking. The woman nodded slightly, but her breathing was uneven. "The baby. It's coming. I need help." Helen didn't know much about childbirth, but she could see the woman was in serious trouble. She looked around. There were no adults, no one nearby who could help. Panic gripped her chest, but she pushed it down. She couldn't walk away. "Not now. Hold on, I'll get someone," she said quickly. But as she turned to leave, the woman grabbed her wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "Please, don't leave me alone," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Helen hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She looked around and spotted an old, torn umbrella leaning against the wall. She ran to grab it and used it to shade the woman from the harsh sunlight. Then she reached into her sack, pulled out a half-full bottle of water she'd saved earlier, and gently offered it to her. The woman drank gratefully, her hands trembling. Helen wiped her face with a corner of her own shirt, trying to offer whatever comfort she could. Minutes felt like hours. Helen kept glancing toward the street, hoping someone would pass by. Finally, she saw a man walking quickly, dressed in a delivery uniform. She stood up and ran toward him, waving her arms. "Sir, please help us. There's a woman in the alley. She's going to have a baby." The man paused, confused, but followed Helen back. When he saw the woman's condition, he quickly pulled out his phone and called for an ambulance. Helen stayed close, holding the woman's hand as they waited. Her own small hand wrapped around the woman's trembling fingers, trying to keep her calm. Soon, the sound of sirens filled the air. Paramedics arrived and carefully lifted the woman onto a stretcher. As they carried her away, she looked at Helen with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You saved me. And my baby." Helen stood frozen as the ambulance disappeared into the distance. The street grew quiet again, but inside her, something had changed. She had done something good, something that mattered. She turned around, her sack still resting near the bakery wall. She picked it up and slowly walked back into the city. She was still tired, still hungry, still without a home. But now, there was something new in her heart. A strange warmth. A sense that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to take a turn she never expected. She peeled away the mold from the bread, her fingers trembling but quick. Sitting under the shade of a nearby tree, she placed her sack beside her and took a moment to breathe. As she held the bread, her hand shook. It was the first time in days she had anything close to a meal. It felt like a blessing. She took a small bite, chewing slowly. Just as she raised the bread again, a strange thud broke the silence. She froze. It sounded like something heavy had collapsed. Helen quickly turned her head toward the sound. Behind the dump where she had found the bread, a woman was lying motionless on the ground. Helen's eyes widened. The woman's clothes were dusty, her face soaked in sweat, and her arms clutched a visibly swollen belly. She looked like she could barely breathe, completely drained of energy. Helen's heart began to race. The woman was clearly pregnant and in trouble. Without thinking, Helen dropped her bread and rushed to her. It was the first time she had ever seen someone in such distress. Panic pressed on her chest as she knelt beside the woman, gently trying to raise her head. "Ma, can you hear me?" she asked, her voice shaky. There was no answer. The woman's eyes were shut, and her body trembled faintly. She didn't look like she could move at all. Helen looked around desperately. The street was quiet. No one was near. No help in sight. Her eyes fell on the bakery, the same place that had tossed out the bread she just ate. Maybe they had water. Maybe she could do something. She glanced down at her ragged clothes and bare feet. Doubts crept in. Would they even listen to her? Or just send her away like everyone else? But there was no time to hesitate. The woman needed help. Helen stood up, her determination stronger than her fear. She ran toward the bakery. It was busy. People working, talking, laughing. No one noticed her at first. Her eyes scanned quickly until they landed on a small bowl near a shelf. She darted forward, grabbed it, and rushed to the big blue drum in the corner. Her hands moved fast, scooping water into the bowl. Someone saw her. "Hey! What are you doing?" a man shouted. But she didn't stop. She turned and ran back, the water nearly spilling over. She didn't care. All that mattered was getting back in time. When she reached the woman again, she gently opened her mouth and poured a little water in. The woman swallowed slowly, her lips dry and cracked. Helen took the rest and lightly sprinkled it across her forehead, hoping it would ease the heat that seemed to be sucking the life from her. The woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, filled with confusion and exhaustion. Helen stayed close, her hands still trembling, unsure of what else to do. The woman's gaze met hers. "Thank you," she whispered faintly. "I didn't think anyone would stop." Helen said nothing. She just continued to dab water across the woman's skin, using the sleeve of her shirt to wipe away sweat. She wasn't doing it for praise. She simply couldn't walk away. Bit by bit, the woman sat up. Her body was weak, but she was regaining strength slowly. Helen supported her gently, keeping her from falling over. The sun still blazed overhead, but something about the moment felt calm. "My name is Bianca," the woman said after a pause, her voice steadier now. Helen gave a small smile. "I'm Helen." Bianca's eyes softened. "You have a good heart, Helen. You saved me. I didn't think anyone still cared." Her words warmed Helen's heart. She had grown used to being invisible, ignored. But now, for the first time in so long, someone saw her. Bianca reached into her worn bag and brought out a bent business card, along with a few folded bills. She placed them gently in Helen's hand. "Please, keep this. My number is on it," she said. "I want you to call me when you can. I can't talk now, but promise me you'll call." Helen stared at the card, the letters unfamiliar. She couldn't read what it said, but the money was real. Enough to buy food. Real food. Her eyes welled with quiet joy. Maybe today won't be like the others, she thought, holding the card as if it were something sacred. She helped Bianca to her feet, keeping her steady as she slowly moved away, pausing now and then to catch her breath. Before disappearing down the street, Bianca turned one last time. "Thank you, Helen," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. Helen didn't respond out loud. She just stood there, watching until Bianca vanished into the crowd. Then she looked down at the card and money in her hand. She had done something good. Something real. That night, she lay on the hard floor of the same building she always returned to. But this time, tucked in the corner of the space she called home, was a card. A reminder of a moment that gave her hope. 10 months passed. Not much had changed. The streets were still her world. She still gathered scraps, sold what she could, and ate only when she earned enough. The same sky stretched above her every night, and the same walls surrounded her when she tried to sleep. But something had stayed with her. That business card. Folded and kept safe like a treasure. She never called Bianca. Why would she remember me? Helen often thought. I helped her once. That doesn't mean I should disturb her life. The thought haunted her on the loneliest days. She didn't want to become a burden. Maybe Bianca had returned to her world, a place Helen couldn't even imagine. Still, some nights, she would pull out the card and stare at it. She couldn't read what it said, but she remembered Bianca's voice and the look in her eyes. Maybe one day, she whispered to herself. Maybe someday. And so the card remained, tucked away in a quiet corner of her shelter, waiting, untouched, full of possibility. I don't need to reach out. I just have to keep going, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. With that, Helen stepped into the busy street, her eyes flicking left and right as cars sped past in both directions. The traffic was relentless, horns blaring and engines roaring. She waited for just the right moment, then stepped forward, trying to cross. She had barely reached the middle when a loud screech tore through the air. She turned her head, too late. A car came barreling toward her, the driver slamming the brakes. But the vehicle didn't stop in time. It hit her with brutal force, sending her small body twisting through the air before crashing hard onto the scorching pavement. The sickening thud echoed down the road. Gasps rippled through the market. People froze, then ran toward her, horror written across their faces. The driver, gripped by fear, sped off without even looking back. A man shouted, "Call an ambulance," as others crowded around her. One woman knelt, placing her scarf beneath Helen's head while another waved frantically at oncoming traffic to keep them away. Within minutes, sirens wailed and paramedics rushed to the scene. Helen's clothes were torn, her skin marked with bruises and cuts. She was still breathing, but barely. The medical team worked quickly, lifting her gently onto a stretcher and rushing her into the ambulance. No one could say for sure if she would survive. "Will she make it?" one paramedic asked, eyes fixed on Helen's fragile frame. "We'll try everything," his partner replied grimly. At the hospital, The halls were silent except for the hum of machines. Helen lay still in a bed, pale and motionless, her shallow breaths monitored by blinking lights. The doctors worked tirelessly, but her condition remained uncertain. Then the door opened quietly, and a woman in a crisp white coat stepped in. She stopped cold. Her eyes widened as they landed on the unconscious girl. "It's her," Bianca whispered, her heart dropping into her stomach. She stepped closer, unable to believe what she was seeing. It had been almost a year since the day a little girl had saved her life. And now, that same girl lay broken before her. Bianca's hands trembled as she reached for Helen's. It was cold but alive. Her grip tightened. "No, not her. Not now," she whispered. "She gave everything to save me. I can't let this be the end." From that moment, Bianca never left her side. She stayed through the nights and days, checking on the doctors, helping the nurses, cleaning Helen's forehead with a damp cloth, whispering softly even when there was no reply. "You're strong, Helen. You didn't give up on me, and I won't give up on you," she said again and again. Even with a baby waiting at home, just 7 months old, Bianca remained in the hospital, trusting her mother to care for the child while she stayed with Helen. She couldn't leave. Not until she was sure Helen was out of danger. The hospital staff watched with quiet amazement. Some whispered, confused by her devotion, "Isn't that the owner of the hospital?" "Yes, that's her. She's been here every night. She could have hired anyone to do this. Why is she doing it herself?" But Bianca never answered. She didn't owe anyone an explanation. What Helen had done for her could never be repaid. Not fully. Her presence was her way of honoring that moment. She owed her everything. Each day passed slowly. Helen's condition showed small signs of improvement. The swelling on her face reduced. Her breathing became less strained. The doctors were surprised by her recovery. They couldn't explain it, but Bianca could. She believed Helen was fighting, just like she always had. One morning, as the first light streamed through the window and lit up the small room, Bianca sat beside her as usual. Her fingers gently brushed strands of hair from Helen's forehead. Then she saw it. Helen's fingers twitched. Her heart skipped. Again, the fingers moved. Bianca leaned in, holding her breath. Helen's chest lifted slightly, and her eyelids fluttered open. The girl blinked slowly, her eyes adjusting to the light. "Helen," Bianca breathed, the name trembling from her lips. Helen turned her head, confused. Her voice was weak. Where am I?" Tears filled Bianca's eyes as she smiled. "You're safe," she said softly. "You're in the hospital." Helen looked around, her gaze unsteady. Nothing seemed familiar at first. The memories of the accident were hazy, broken. She studied Bianca's face, uncertain, but then, something clicked. A memory surfaced, faint but sharp. "You," she whispered. "You were the woman behind the bakery? The one by the dumpster?" Bianca nodded, her eyes glistening. "Yes, Helen. That was me." Helen's eyes widened, disbelief and recognition mingling. Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat. She had saved Bianca once, never expecting anything in return. And now this woman, a stranger she had once helped without question, was the one sitting by her side. She had never imagined the kindness she'd given would come back to her like this. Bianca nodded, a gentle smile forming on her face. "Yes," she said with emotion lacing her voice. "You saved me when no one else would. I never forgot you, Helen. I just didn't know how to find you. I kept hoping one day you'd call. Tears welled up in Helen's eyes as the weight of the moment sank in. The woman she had once struggled to help, so desperate to keep alive, was now the one standing by her side, giving her a second chance. Gratitude swelled in her chest, easing the pain she'd carried for so long. I didn't think anyone would ever care about me, she whispered, her tears now rolling freely. Bianca reached out and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, her touch reassuring and steady. Rest now, she said gently. You're not alone anymore. I'll take care of everything. And for the first time in a very long time, Helen let herself relax. Though her body was still weak, her heart felt lighter. She wasn't alone. Bianca stayed with her each day, filled with hope and relief now that Helen was awake. It marked the beginning of something new for both of them. As Helen's wounds slowly healed, she gained strength. One morning, she sat upright without help. Her legs felt steadier, the tightness in her chest had eased. Bianca smiled as she watched her. You're doing so well, Helen, she said softly. I think it's time you come home. Helen blinked in confusion. Home? She asked uncertainly. Bianca's voice softened even more. No one's come for you since you were admitted. I waited, hoping someone might. But it's been weeks. Helen lowered her gaze, her voice barely audible. I have no one. No family. I've always been alone. Bianca's heart ached. She leaned closer and held Helen's hand. You're not alone anymore. I want to take you to my home. Helen's heart raced at the thought. She had never imagined such kindness, never dreamed of living in a real home. The idea felt too big, too wonderful to be real. Bianca gave her a warm smile. I'd love to know more about your story. But that can wait until you're rested. She helped Helen into fresh clothes and walked her to the car. As they drove through the city, Helen watched in awe. The clean roads, the beautiful houses. It felt like another world. When they arrived, she could hardly believe her eyes. The house was massive, surrounded by greenery and flowers. At the front door stood Bianca's husband, a tall, kind-looking man. I've heard so much about you, he said, smiling warmly. You saved my wife's life when no one else would. Helen felt overwhelmed. I didn't do anything special, she murmured. You did more than you realize, he replied. Inside, Bianca's mother greeted Helen with a warm embrace. We're so glad to have you here, she said with genuine kindness. It was all too much. From struggling on the streets to being welcomed into a family, it felt like a dream. For the first time, Helen felt safe. Bianca gently guided her down a hallway. Come, I'll show you to your room. You can freshen up and rest. We'll talk later when you're ready. She opened the door to a cozy, well-furnished room. This is yours now, she said softly. Helen stood still, taking it all in. The warmth of the room, the comfort. It was unlike anything she had ever known. Later that evening, after a hot meal, Helen joined the family in the living room. The house was calm, but there was a quiet seriousness in the air. Bianca cleared her throat. Helen, she began kindly, we'd like to ask you a few things. Just so we understand you better and know how to help. Helen nodded slowly. No one had ever cared enough to ask before. The fact that they wanted to understand her meant everything. Bianca's husband and mother listened closely as Helen began. I come from a nearby village, she said quietly. My grandmother raised me. My mother died giving birth to me. She wasn't married. My grandmother took care of me until I was 8. Then, she passed away too. Her voice caught in her throat, but she continued. She had high blood pressure. It got worse, and one day she didn't wake up. After that, I had no one. I came to the city to survive. Bianca's mother gently touched Helen's arm. You've been through so much, child. Helen nodded, her voice breaking. It hasn't been easy. I did what I could to eat, to stay safe. Bianca's husband leaned in slightly. Did you go to school at any point? I did, she answered. A community primary school. I was in primary 5 when my grandmother died. After that, I couldn't continue. They exchanged a quiet look before Bianca spoke again. Thank you for telling us. We need a little time to talk as a family. But you should get some sleep now. We'll speak more soon. Helen nodded, grateful for their understanding. She rose, made her way upstairs, and lay on the soft bed, staring at the ceiling. Everything still felt surreal. Would they truly accept her? The next day turned into the next week. Bianca and her husband began making inquiries, researching legal adoption. When they sat Helen down to tell her, she could hardly believe the words. You want to adopt me? She asked, stunned. Bianca smiled, her eyes gentle. Yes, Helen. You've become part of our lives. We want to give you the future you deserve. We want you to stay. Tears filled Helen's eyes. I've never had a family before, she whispered. But I want this. I really do. The paperwork began, slowly but surely. As the process unfolded, Helen began to settle into her new life. With love surrounding her and a sense of belonging, she finally felt safe. But there was still something she longed for. An education. She shared her wish, and Bianca and her husband listened. You've been through so much, Bianca said kindly. But we can see your strength and determination. We'll get you a tutor, help you catch up. We want you in secondary school. Helen lit up. I'll work hard. I promise. The tutor arrived, and Helen began studying every day. She gave it her all, pushing through difficulties, determined to succeed. Months later, she sat for her entrance exams, and passed. You did it! Bianca exclaimed, hugging her. You passed both the first school exams and your entrance into secondary school. Helen could barely hold back her tears. I'm going to school, she whispered in disbelief. Time moved forward. Helen flourished, no longer the lost girl on the streets, but a student, loved and supported. She had found her place, her purpose, her family. Her journey was a testament to resilience, compassion, and the extraordinary power of kindness. What began as one selfless act became the beginning of a new life. Sometimes, when you give love without expecting anything in return, it finds its way back in ways you never imagined. Helen's story reminds us all. No one is truly forgotten. And even when life is hard, hope has a way of finding those who refuse to give up. What did you think of Helen's story? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss the next story. If you enjoyed this one, please like and share it with friends. Together, let's spread some hope and inspiration. Thank you for watching, and see you again very soon.